Man, they're not kidding that when summer rolls around, the road construction starts, and they are starting with a bang this year, resurfacing Harmony Road, basically from Timberline all the way out to I-25. And it's probably some of the worst traffic I've seen in a long time. It gets backed up and backed up, in a hurry, especially during kind of rush hour time period. And I noticed it actually as we're driving east on Carpenter because we were going to soccer practice in Windsor for the kiddos. And so we took Carpenter Road, and along Timberline and Carpenter it would take me 2 or 3 times at the stoplight to get through Carpenter, which before the Harmony Road construction happened, it was just, quick, easy, get through there. But people are trying to get away from that traffic by any means necessary. And it could very well take you, some significant time. We were picking up my kids from school the other day, needed to go get haircuts we go to Johnstown to go get their haircuts. And instead of going Harmony to I-25 at like 3:30 in the afternoon, I was like, no, we're going to go LeMay up to Carpenter over and then down that way. And it saved us maybe a little bit of time. But, from there, we're seeing other projects take place as well, beginning today on College in Trilby. It's a $12 million project. They're widening the roads, making it dual travel lane, turn lanes, and hopefully that area gets a whole lot less congested because, during, the midday lull of traffic, it's not too bad. But I would say beginning of the day and then end of the day, it can absolutely get backed up. We used to have our kids in a daycare over off Trilby and Shields, Ridgeview. That's not can't think of the dang name right now, but we in a neighborhood over there, and we would pick them up, then come back east to our house on College and Trilby essentially, and it would be backed up as well. So that's definitely needed. That's a $12 million project, and as the last 6 months have been extremely enjoyable on I-25 without any road construction, the next big phase, which will then allow for there to be 3 lanes of traffic all the way from Fort Collins to Denver, is going to start this May and go all the way from May 2024 to May 2028. So it's another 9-mile stretch, about $450 million is the projected expense. And it will be a headache for another 4 years. And I'm guessing right after that, we're going to need to start construction again to move from 3 lanes to 4 lanes. But it's interesting talking to friends and family, that have moved from all over the world and country to Fort Collins. And like a friend of ours that moved from Houston, Texas, is like, no, there's no area in Houston that's not at least 5 lanes wide on each side, if not more. So the idea that we have this traffic here in Fort Collins is laughable. And I'm like, man, I grew up where there was never any traffic, and I could get from the southeast side to downtown in 15 minutes, no problem. And now maybe on a Friday afternoon, maybe it's 20 to 25 minutes from downtown to my house on the far southeast side of town. So we local yokels aren't super used to the traffic here in Fort Collins. And that kind of main economic artery that is I-25, just always road construction. But I can say that 3rd lane from Fort Collins Prospect, basically to just south of Loveland, has been phenomenal. That 19-mile stretch, 3 lanes, no traffic, everybody's just cruising. So yes, it's going to be an annoyance and a headache for the next 4 years. But then they will have 3 lanes. And I remember when Longmont opened up a 3rd lane from Longmont to Denver, and it was a bottleneck all the way until you got to that Longmont. And then like just the Red Sea opened and parted ways, and everyone could just rush down. And there was little to no traffic until you got past Thornton, and then obviously got down to Denver, and it gets busy down there for sure. So road traffic is beginning and rock and rolling. One of the things that we're going to jump into, things focus on today specifically, is the Fort Collins schools closures, consolidations, scenarios. We have got a friend in one of the neighborhoods that is very much on the chopping block, and all of the anxiety and fear and frustration and anger that is happening around that. So, we will definitely jump into that. But, we talk about live in Fort Collins every Monday at noon. We go live and we talk to you guys about things, things that are happening. City council review. We watch our city council meeting every Tuesday, whether that's a work session or an actual regular session, kind of report back on that, what's happening. We'll discuss the two main discussions that happened this last Tuesday. And then, things that you can do. But really, we're probably not going to jump too much into things that you can do too much this week, as we want to really focus on the meat and potatoes of the situation, which is the Pter School District consolidations. And we will have Zach Jordan, one of my business partners, jump on with me here about halfway through to help discuss and kind of just have an open conversation. And I'm super curious, if you're watching this, leave a comment, ask a question, what your thoughts are, if you have any, with the Pter School District consolidation, school closures. And but we'll jump into that and spend a significant amount of time on that here soon, because I think it has an impact on all of Fort Collins. One of the big things that's very important in northern Colorado and the state of Colorado, and all states, is water and the supply of it. And Thornton owns a good amount of shares of water that come from the Pter. And well, how does Thornton get water that's coming from the Pter? And they do that by way of a pipeline. And so they got to build a pipeline, and it's been going on since I think 2018 or so. And Larimer County did approve a 10-mile stretch to get this pipeline built. Thornton is ecstatic, and they are going to get their water, but there's with some kind of caveats to that. And we've got family that lives on the northeast side of Fort Collins, the north side of Fort Collins, off Highway 1, and they were going to be impacted. And I think the pipeline at one point, I'm not sure if it's still going to, was going to go through a portion of their backyard. So definitely something that a lot of people were paying attention to. There was advocacy groups against it. Save the Pter, definitely is a big one for Northern Integrated Supply Project, Northern NISP, Northern Integration Supply Project, I think is what it is. Northern Integrated Supply Project. Yes, NISP, which is a big project that's going to ultimately be a big part of Glade Reservoir on the north side of Fort Collins off of US 287. So, pretty important, but people are definitely fighting for their water rights, trying to get them. Halligan Reservoir being built, they're the dam that's being built so that we can have more water storage. And I'm joking with, friends that, especially that same one that moved from Houston, they moved here a year ago, and, we're the high desert, but man, we got crushed with water and even flooding on the southeast side of town last year. And this year we're getting good amount of rain this year. And it's like, man, we haven't even turned on our sprinklers yet, and it's mid-May. And so it just kind of we have a lot of water currently that we could be storing, but that we don't have the storage capacity. So it's just flowing on down reservoir. And for a drought resistant community, to be able to have a drought resistant community, the Halligan Reservoir being built, Thornton being able to pump their water, Hollow Creek Reservoir that's being built that does not supply anything to Fort Collins, but will be a part of Larimer County open areas. All of these are hugely important projects that will kind of shape how Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, any of all those areas, Weld County, Larimer County, and South, Thornton, Denver, all those areas are able to be developed. Now, I'm excited about technology moving forward, being able to hopefully expand the use of One Drop of Water. A great book, if you haven't read it yet, or if you are interested in, is Colorado or Water Rights in Colorado for the Non-Lawyer. And I do not pretend or get involved with too much going on with water. Actually, we're buying a cabin that we close on tomorrow that's got a well on it. And, there's some water rights there, well transfer, all that kind of stuff that happens through title. But Pter River, Big Thompson River, water shares, farmer, ag use, residential use, so deep. Greeley is the mothership of water rights in Colorado, where Water Court, I believe, is located. But they are property rights very strongly and tightly protected. And I don't pretend to know more than I do. I just know that there is a lot of intricacies, and people, if they own the water, want the water, and have legal ramifications to do that. So we will see a pipeline being built, and hopefully doesn't interfere too much or seen even at all that gets down to Thornton. Now, on a more light note, there was a feasibility study that got approved by City Council not too long ago, about a $40,000 feasibility study to examine where and if pickleball courts should be built in Fort Collins. And I've got some friends that are extremely serious about pickleball. I've been invited to pickleball games and clubs, and I've only played once in my entire life. I do have some pickleball paddles that I have yet to open. A friend gave them to me for my birthday a few months back, but we haven't opened them yet. Don't know if that's an excuse or what, but that being said, it would be something to where the two top contenders are Fossil Creek Park and Spring Canyon Park are the two current front leaders of where pickleball courts could be built, a 12-court pickleball court. There's a great pickleball court on Twin Silos Park. Very small, though. I want to say there's 4 courts there. So this would be pretty decent sized. And if it does end up coming to Fossil Creek Park, I guess I'll have to pick up pickleball at that time. But, we were just talking with some neighbors and, about dropping our kids off at the bus. And they had something going on. He's like, I got an appointment with pickleball. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was just a matter of how serious they were about it and excited. So it's a very fast growing sport. Interestingly enough, the biggest concern about pickleball is the sound. And I could see that with that wiffle ball being smashed back and forth comparatively to tennis. But if Fossil Creek had it, there's plenty of space, not a ton of residential, at least super close by. So I'm sure they could kind of muffle that sound or make it almost not, audible for a lot of people, as well as Spring Canyon Park. Not so much the case with, Adora Park, Roland Moore Park. Twin Silos has the small courts, but even still, like the school's right there. So I could see how these kind of scored well on whatever, scoring system they had. But others that are in the hunt, Adora scored an 8, City Park a 7, Roland Moore a 5, Lee Martinez and Twin Silos scored a 4. So it looks like Fossil Creek Park could be leading the way if we were to see some pickleball courts being built. All right, we're going to jump into what City Council had discussed this last week, and then we're going to jump into the Pter School District conversation because it's going to be a little bit longer of a conversation. So City Council passed on second reading unanimously 7.0 Land Use Code 3.0, or essentially, the foundational land use code. And it was a very much, especially from the original land development code 1.0, extremely watered down from that. And then there was 9 contentious items in land use code 2.0 that were also removed. And those 9 items were removing accessory dwelling units as a permanent housing type in low residential and urban estates. Remove duplex as a permitted housing unit and NCL/OTA, because that's probably one of the biggest things that this foundational land use code change does is make some of these zones easier to understand, the development process easier, what can and cannot be used in and on property. So it was kind of more of a functional change, if anything, rather than like a change based off of what you can and cannot do, increasing. I would say there was a massive push. There was 5 goals originally, and density was absolutely one of them. And that's kind of, for lack of a better word, very much been watered down. Maintain current lot size for residential units on NCL OTA, because one of the things that they were talking about is rather than being able to subdivide lots into 12,000 square foot lots, which is what it currently is, you could subdivide them all the way down to like 4,500 square foot lots. Or sorry, you could subdivide 12,000 square foot lots into 6,000 square foot lots, but you couldn't subdivide less than that. And then they made a change that you could do it all the way to 4,500 square foot lots. So tiny, teeny, tiny little lots, put houses on them, subdivide, but they maintained the minimum lot size for residential. Remove affordable housing incentives of additional housing types, NCL OTA. NCM OTB, again, maintain current 4-unit maximum for multi-unit building. Prior, you were going to be able to go all the way up to like a 6-plex on this. Maintain current lot size for residential units. Again, similar deal to NCL OTA. I don't know the exact square footages of what it was and what it's going to be, but essentially what the Land Development Code and Land Use Code 2.0 were trying to do was make smaller lots possible for subdividing and increasing density on what we currently have, what our current lot inventory is. And again, remove affordable housing incentive of additional density. And then finally, the last two were revisions for the HOAs, because HOAs, have some bylaws and covenants that they require architectural reviews and what they do and do not allow in developments and within projects and planned unit developments, PUDs. And the Land Development Code and Land Use Code were going to supersede those, essentially saying, HOAs, you can't tell us what to do. If somebody wants to build an ADU on their house, they're going to be able to do it, regardless of what you say. You don't have any say. You can maybe say a little bit about architectural review, about how it looks, but you can't say anything. And what they said, and HOAs were kind of fighting back, saying, hey, well, wait a second. People bought into these neighborhoods because they want to have some kind of assurance of what they're buying and where they're buying. So again, what they did was remove language prohibiting HOAs from regulating the number of and or type of dwelling units permitted on a lot. And then finally, remove the language prohibiting HOAs from regulating the ability to subdivide property. And again, that was another one where if your lot was big enough, you could potentially subdivide, but potentially because of the HOA covenants and bylaws, you weren't going to, but City of Fort Collins saying, no, you can. So some of these were pulled out, and these were the most contentious, hotly debated topics. And so Foundational Land Use Code 3.0, I don't think it's actually called that, but it's just called Foundational Land Use Code, was passed. I did go on to Preserve Fort Collins website, and I did not see any, infighting or issues. Ross Cuniff called in on Tuesday, said, hey, this looks great. We're not super stoked about the density requirements or density increase on OTB, allowing for up to 85% of the lot size to be built on. But the likelihood with that of like setbacks and all that kind of stuff was probably pretty minimum, like height of buildings. So there's still so many restrictions based off of what you can do on a lot that even if you could build up to 85% of the lot size, doesn't mean that you can based off of other restrictions. So I think some of these things were, unfounded, but I guess, yeah, I mean, sure. The idea of a 10,000 square foot lot having an 8,500 square foot worth of building on there probably is not the funnest. And technically, could that happen? Sure. But I bet you it's few and far between. But even for that one that maybe is built, I feel bad for that neighbor. Sure. So there's absolutely something to take into consideration there. One of the things that they talked about consistently was kind of how this home rule and kind of big brother of the state of Colorado that just passed occupancy, removed occupancy limitations, and which dramatically impacts Fort Collins. We have a client that we're looking at. They have a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house down near CSU, which technically they were either going to have to rent to a family or, only 3 people that were unrelated, and essentially maybe leave one of those bedrooms unoccupied. Now, a lot of people were breaking rules, laws, technically could be very, very much in trouble and fined, as was Boulder, but Boulder removed their occupancy laws earlier last year. And sorry if you hear my kiddos, they're just having fun back there. but state of Colorado removed occupancy limits based off of familial status across the state of Colorado, which goes into effect in July. And this immediately changes home values and also, sounds like someone went bad out there, home values and, rental rates too. And that was the big push about why the state of Colorado was allowing this to happen, was because, or pushed for this to happen, was because they were suggesting that rental rates could be relatively dramatically impacted if we could unleash all of these unused bedrooms. And so that would be interesting to see. But the city council members during city council were discussing like, hey, this is concerning. The state of Colorado is concerning us because, well, they just did this with occupancy limits, and they're very much wanting to put in increased capacity and densification, these metropolitan areas, metropolitan statistical areas, MSAs, by way of ADUs. And I can say from my perspective and conversations I've had with other people that are, I would say familiar with the topics at hand, I think city council is absolutely doing that. They're saying, hey, let's pass foundational land use code 3.0 and get on to our commercial land use code update. Phase 2 is what they're saying, so that we can actually get down this road and start kind of moving forward with our lives and let the state push some of their agenda on us, Fort Collins, which would be impacted by some of these changes. And a couple of the city council members were not excited about that. I can tell you all of Preserve Fort Collins I did go onto their Facebook page, and they're not excited about it. And they're probably going to try to put up a fight if things like this do pass. But the occupancy limits having just changed and going to affect mid-July, or I believe July 1st, that's a huge change to Fort Collins specifically, that since the 1960s has had this in place and have really been enforcing it since 2007. I have a couple of 4-bedroom rentals, and fortunately, we've never really had to deal with a U+2 issue. But let's say if I had 4 college kids that wanted to rent out my bi-level down, near Bolts, I couldn't rent it to them. Or if I did, I'd be breaking the law. And so I could only have 3 on there, or more than likely just not allow them to rent there because, hey, I'm only going to allow 3 people. You guys have to sign an occupancy limits disclosure. And sorry. And so they couldn't afford it. But now maybe with being able to rent all 4 bedrooms, they could afford those rents, and I could open it up and allow that to happen without breaking the law. So that was huge. I mean, it impacted, I don't remember if it was, I think it was 15,000, not 1,500. I didn't check, I didn't verify this before I got on here, but I believe it was 15,000 bedrooms were estimated empty because of the U+2 rule, which if it is getting removed, that's 15,000 potential bedrooms that could come up for rent, sooner than later, and potentially ease some of the rental burden on our citizens. The second thing that they talked about at the city of Fort Collins was this Mason Street overall development plan, an ODP, and how high level it works is initially when there's a project that is kind of up for consideration, an ODP has to take place first. And then from there, a project phase development, a PDP, a project development phase, goes from there. So that's kind of like more granular, specific phases of developments or buildings, all that good stuff. Well, although it's not explicitly stated, the city and a private owner, I believe it was Bohemian, did a land swap so that they could essentially build their homeless shelter over near Hickory. And the ODP was passed unanimously by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And while it wasn't explicitly stated that this is what was going to happen in the future of this homeless shelter, which is going to be between 200 to 300 beds being built, is kind of what it's doing, is making way for this. And so North College Business Association, which is, honestly, it looks so much better than when I was growing up here. North College, north of Jefferson, started to get just kind of rough, and it was run down and kind of, just not the most beautiful thing. But over the last 10, 15 years, with the building of the medians, King Soopers development going on there, the development along Suniga, the development behind Jack's, I mean, people reinvesting in this North College Avenue, business district, it's beautiful. It's safe. It's clean. It continues to kind of domino effect. And lots of people have got pretty decent sized investments now in this area. And I too would probably feel something similar if I felt like, well, shoot, now we're going to have a 250 bed homeless shelter be built right here. And we just dropped, a few $1 million on this development or house or condo or whatever that might be. And so it's scary. And while I do think between the city of Fort Collins, Bohemian Foundation, and other developers who are a part of this, the Denver mission, I do think this is going to be a state-of-the-art building, safe, secure, well-kept, well-maintained. It is for homeless men only, but it is potentially going to be 200 to 300 overnight beds. But it's a 24-hour shelter that serves lunch, breakfast, dinner, and we helped serve at the mission last year, and just kind of we're really excited to see what they do and what they provide, and they can expand this based off of the size and ability if this is built. But regardless, the ODP wasn't necessarily discussing this homeless shelter. It was discussing what can be built here based off of the retention pond, flooding, and the area. And it took two parcels. It's separating them into three and basically making way for this future potential development of the homeless shelter. And so there was an appeal that was brought forward to City Council by some members of some citizens of Fort Collins. And it was appealed for three different things, I believe two different things, basically that there was some basically gross negligence on the P&Z side of things, that they didn't review everything as needed and didn't follow the land use code to what they should have been. Well, the appeal was, basically just kind of trying to throw some hurdles and obstacles at it, because it was very emotional by this individual. And, I don't have a dog in the fight per se. I do think that the mission being moved from where it currently is on Jefferson and Linden would be great for downtown and Old Town, but I could see how businesses feel negatively impacted for it moving on North College on the west side of College Avenue. So, it's kind of one of these things, and we're going to talk about Pter School District here in a second, and Zach's probably going to be jumping on here in 3 minutes. Or he should be, I think, jumping on with us in 3 minutes if he can get some access. But, regardless, it was an emotional appeal that City of Fort Collins upheld Planning and Zoning's ruling 7-0 on both appeals. And so, this project is going to continue to move forward. There's still many years to come between the PDPs that have to get approved, then the developments, the building, the time. So, we're years from seeing a homeless shelter out off of North College, probably 2-3 minimum. But it seems like it is happening, and it's happening right there off of Hickory and College Avenue. And so, the more you know, and that's why we do this. That's why we are doing this live in Fort Collins, is to try to bring more and more information, and also sharpen our own swords. As hey, we own and operate a brokerage here. We're licensed real estate agents, and the more that we know about Fort Collins, the more that we can help advise our clients and be resources and valuable, rather than just transactional agents. So, and speaking about transactional agents, Zach should be jumping on with us here soon. But the nuts and bolts of today's conversation for the next 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever it takes, we are going to be talking about the Pter School District consolidation. And, basically their primary objective is, right now we have decreasing enrollment, and schools are being subsidized, and the demographic change from population growth on the west side to population growth on the east side, house affordability, all that kind of stuff is having an impact, and school enrollment isn't where it should be, and our budget is suffering because of it. So there has been a school consolidation steering committee. I believe it's 37 or 39. There was at least 30 individuals who are part of this steering committee and came up with a plan a couple months back, maybe a month or 2 months back, that essentially outlined, let's see here, that essentially outlined some potential scenarios of what would be consolidated in Fort Collins, and lots of different schools were thrown out. Beatty, Pter, CLP, Blevins, lots of different schools on the west side. And then how are they going to deal with on the east side, kind of over enrollment with like Timnath Middle High School. Wellington isn't even really in the topic of conversation, but their goal, the primary objective for this school consolidation, is to have an average enrollment, a district-wide average enrollment for 400 students at the elementary and 700 students at middle schools, respectively. And they played on this. They kind of looked at this of a lot of different from a lot of different lenses. And so they look at geography, physical proximity to schools and other schools. Like, how easy would it be for this school to close and parents to then drive their kids to a school that's close by? Is there a school close by? And so they kind of have three different boundaries. They've got east of College Avenue, and then they've got northwest and southwest boundaries. So they east, northwest, southwest, because that was kind of where they saw the most issues with oversupply and undersupply of students, I guess is the best way to put it. Now, here we go. We're going to start with evaluations of the Southwest. So really there was 4 schools here. Let's go here. The Southwest elementaries are projected to have 2,208 students spread across schools in 2027, averaging only 315 schools per student. So, and the goal is to get to up to 400. So what they saw was they needed to close 2 of the 7 schools on the west side, elementary schools. And the schools that they're looking at are Pter, Beatty, Johnson, and Lopez. And I can say that I have a friend that lives in 2. Oh, no. One's on the east side, Linton. I have a friend that has their kids going to Linton, and a friend whose kids are going to Johnson. And Johnson is absolutely on the chopping block, seemingly. But Pter is one of the schools, but they're not too much on there because they have one of the highest enrollments. They're really not included on any of the options. Beatty, this has had the lowest amount of kids in their school really over the last 10 years or so. And so that's on the chopping block on every single one of the scenarios. And they over 40% of the students within the Beatty school boundaries go outside of the school for school of choice, which I thought was super interesting as far as that statistic. Johnson Elementary. Now, Johnson Elementary has they're kind of getting impacted because just their geographic location to Lopez, Olander, and McGraw. They can easily be absorbed into these other schools. And they have one of the lowest building utilization enrollments. And then Lopez is one of the largest schools. It has a 4-track school, and they can really just accommodate more students based off of that. So those are the Southwest elementaries up on the chopping block. Now, the Northwest elementaries are CLP. Now, the problem with CLP is it's one of the only schools in LaPorte, the only school in LaPorte. And so geographically, it's just really difficult because it could add significant time for parents to school and bus their kids. Dunn Elementary. Now, one of the big problems with Dunn Elementary is that only 180 students that go to Dunn Elementary are within the Dunn boundary. So everyone else is school of choicing into Dunn. Irish is one of the few dual language programs. And so they're thinking about how they could potentially keep that, but within kindergarten through 2nd grade, because if you haven't been in a dual language program from kindergarten through 2nd grade, it's more difficult. So they might remove that after 3rd grade. And then Putnam Elementary. This has the lowest enrollment in the area. And but it also has the highest enrollment of kind of at-risk students, low income and non-white, and it's located near downtown. So, and other things that they looked at is like, what is the cost to build AC? So if it gets down to it, and they're exactly identical, but one's going to cost $4 million to add AC, and one maybe is $2 million. They very well might go with that one that costs $4 million to get chopped on the chopping block, and go with the $2 million, because that's $2 million worth of savings that they could potentially, see. Oh, did I miss one? I think I did. On the east side of Fort Collins Elementary, Bamford is considering doing some redrawing and feeding into Preston and Preston and Kennard. And then Linton Elementary is one of the only elementary schools on the east side in Fort Collins that is up on the chopping block, but it is also a dual language school. There are some income considerations there. But let's see here. Now, the middle school is up for evaluation, Timnath. And this is because really it's a Timnath Middle High School, and there's already at capacity. So maybe considering making the Timnath Middle High into a high school only. Oh, Zach's here.
Hey, how we doing?
Zach, you hear me?
Yep. Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. I'm just sitting out here in front of Bacon Elementary at the park.
Mute mic. Zach, I can't hear you from whatever reason, but
can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I can't hear you. Oh, wait. This might be because I'll do this real quick. Might be me. Might be me. Might be me. There we go.
I'll take it.
I hear you
now. You can hear me?
I got you.
Okay. No, I was just saying I'm sitting over here in front of Zach Elementary here at Radiant Park, across the street from Twin Silos. So.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Yes. And nothing really happened on the southeast side of town as far as school closures. I mean, Preston and Kennard are the biggest ones, but I'm going to keep rolling, and then we'll dive into kind of an open conversation about kind of your thoughts. And, because I know Zach's a volunteer coach at Thompson Valley High School. And so, definitely more focused on the Loveland School District per se, but, I think he would be able to have a good insight onto how this could impact parents, after school programs of, track, clubs, all this kind of stuff, if the school isn't just, kind of right there. Because, already there's probably carpooling, after school programs, all these kind of things. I mean, the domino effect is probably endless, but ultimately, it's kind of like cutting off the leg for the greater good, so to speak, it feels like. But Preston is one of the under-enrolled and, is one of the more under-enrolled programs. One of a teacher who's at Lincoln Middle School suggested that it's just a ghost town there. And Kennard is the only 100% choice middle school in Fort Collins, and it's being considered to be changed to a boundary school. Bolts 2 is on the chopping block as far as an option, but it's one of the few dual language programs. And it's also right in the middle of town, which makes it super attractive. Blevins is on all 4 scenarios, and we'll jump into these scenarios here in a second. All 4 scenarios, and it has one of the smallest enrollments. Weber has the best. And then Lincoln, why it's not really on any of the chopping blocks versus Blevins, is because it's probably the biggest feeder into Pter school. So Pter High School. And, they want to keep those kids together. It's easier for those kids to go to school together if they're all going from Lincoln and all going to Pter versus maybe Blevins is half and half, and maybe it's not as easy of a transition versus Lincoln. So some of these are getting more focused on like Johnson, because it's just so located to other schools, and Blevins, being one of the fewest, lowest enrollments, but also because Lincoln is feeding into Pter High School. So there's so many of these dynamics that super interesting when you get into it. And then Cash Laputer, it too, for a middle school, is on the chopping block. But again, it's close to the north side of town. So a lot of people that are driving in, could very much be impacted. So Zach, I'm going to jump into like kind of the 3 or the 4 scenarios. I'm going to,
okay.
But one of the 4 schools that were included on all 4 scenarios was closing Beatty Elementary, closing Blevins, and closed Johnson Elementary, and then balancing the enrollment east of I-25. So that's Bamford, Bethke, and Timnath Elementary. So one of those three, you know, Bamford's really the one that's going to be rebalanced and kind of probably feeding into either Preston and or Fossil Ridge, or moving Timnath Middle High School into a high school only. All right. So, and these aren't finalized, and I do have a link. So if you're watching this and you would like a link to provide feedback, I can absolutely get that to you. But there is a link for feedback. They are going to be having some final scenarios at the end of May and a vote on June 11th for final decisions, which maybe won't be so final because I'm getting some feedback from some parents that are like, we're gathering the war horses, and just like the Land Development Code saw a petition from the city of Fort Collins, maybe there's some whatever you do to get a person on the board off. I can't think about it right now. Recall, recall board members. So we'll see. I think there's going to be some loud voices across Fort Collins, but we'll go through the 4 scenarios. Close Beatty Elementary School and adjust Beatty's attendance to go to Lopez and Bennett. Close Blevins Middle School and then kind of balance into Lincoln and Weber. Close CLP and reassign to Putnam and Tavelli. Close CLP Middle School and go to Lincoln Middle School. Close Johnson Elementary and rebalance to Olander and McGraw. Close Linton Elementary School and reassign to Bacon, Cruz, Werner, and Zach. And then keeping Irish and Putnam open, but that was kind of the K through 2 and kindergarten through 2nd grade and 3rd through 5th grade for dual language, depending on how that would be. And then adjusting boundaries so that Bamford feeds into Fossil Ridge and Preston. And then balancing enrollment between those schools east of I-25 between Timnath, Bethke, and Bamford. Scenario 2, again, close Beatty, close Blevins, close Bolts this time, and those would be moving into Preston and Lesher. Close Johnson, close Linton Elementary, relocate Polaris into the vacated Johnson Elementary. And I can tell you that that's the one that, like, my buddy's like, so not only are we losing our elementary school, but we are going to potentially have to drive our kids out of the neighborhood and then have an entire school driving into the neighborhood. So, you know, where they're going from almost zero traffic to a buttload of traffic would absolutely be frustrating as well. Relocate Irish into the former Polaris building, adjust the boundaries for Bamford, and balance the enrollment again. Scenario E is consolidate Harris and Linton Elementary Schools into a 3-track dual immersion program. These are the only ones on the east side of College Avenue that would be affected. Close Preston Middle School and change Kennard Middle School from a 100% choice into a boundary school. Relocate Polaris, relocate Irish into the Polaris building, close Beatty, close Blevins, close Johnson, and balance enrollment east of I-25. And finally, our last scenario is close Beatty, close Blevins, close Johnson, close Linton, close Putnam Elementary, and reassign those students to Dunn, Irish, Tavelli, and CLP. Make Timnath Middle High School a high school only and reassign those middle school students to Preston Middle School. And then balance enrollment among schools east of I-25. Whew. So those are the scenarios. I mean, you know, I feel like no matter what, someone's going to be mad, right? I'm very fortunate. It's easy for me. I'm like sitting in the Monday morning quarterback chair because I'm not getting impacted at all unless Preston Middle School gets closed. Then I have to we would go to Kennard or Bolts. So we're not super impacted. So it's easy for me to kind of sit back and be like, whatever. I mean, when you hear these closures, Zach, I mean, it's a lot. It's not just like, hey, we're going to close a couple of schools. It's like, we're going to close all these schools.
a handful of schools. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's change is always hard, difficult for everybody, but it is needed to continue to move forward with a school district that is producing quality education.
Yeah, I mean, Pter School District is obviously like we deal with a lot of relocation folks, and one of the big things is they want to be in the Pter school district and will pay a premium to do that. But we've got to be fiscally sound and economically feasible. And it sounds like right now I'm getting more involved with like our school district because obviously my kids are starting to go to them. So I'm starting to pay a little bit more attention than I used to. But, if their goal is 20 to 25 students per classroom, and sometimes they're having classes that are just, empty, or if they could have 4 classrooms going and they only have 3 because, well, they just don't have the students, there's problems. What are your thoughts on kind of the thought process of charter schools? And because there's a lot of people are saying, well, the issue is these charter schools are stealing students and we don't have the funding and blah, blah, blah. And I honestly don't have enough to go on. But what are your thoughts on charter schools and the thought of, potentially stealing kids from, boundary schools?
So, I mean, down in Loveland, we have a charter school, New Vision, and it steals quite a few kids. But I think the upside that I see there is a lot of these charter schools are K through 12. So how they're kind of balancing out numbers is they always have this influx of kids coming in and going out, catering to the K through 12. So I kind of like it, honestly. I know it hurts the local neighborhoods with having their school in their neighborhood, but I mean, once you do a build in like Timnath right now, a lot of new young families coming in, if they even build a new elementary school, I mean, you only have a set amount of time where that school is actually being active until those kids grow out of that school. So without a lot of movement, and Fort Collins and Northern Colorado being such a sought after place to live, people aren't leaving. So you kind of grow out of it, and the enrollment just drops down tremendously.
Well, that's exactly what's happening on like the west side. People are aging in place, and the kids just aren't there that used to be.
Yeah. We're seeing it all across Northern Colorado of dropping, and they're trying to redo these boundaries and whatnot for enrollment numbers. But yeah, it's definitely impacting class sizes for sure.
Yeah. And again, like I'm fortunate that it's not necessarily impacted me too much, but, we've had clients that, we've got clients that are moving here that just closed on a house from South Carolina, and they're going to have a high schooler and then one kid going into middle school, and where it was going to be both kids were going to be at Timnath Middle High. Now I should put a caveat. This doesn't take place until the 25-26 school year. I'm pretty dang certain. I got to verify that. So we're still a year out from it taking place. And so this would only minimally impact him. So this kid would only be in middle school for 1 year, but still comparatively to being able to drive both kids to middle and high, they were going to have to drive now from one to high school and then one to middle school. So this impacts them, and this change came to be in the middle of their contract process. And so again, it's easy for me to say, it's change happens, and it's easy and it's going to be difficult, but, we've got to remain pretty, economically feasible. And I don't know, I'll be very curious. I mean, you probably see how fired up parents can get at track, meets and things of that nature. I can only imagine if all of a sudden you thought your kid was going to go to one school for the next 5 years, and now you have to drive them, a few miles.
Exactly. And I mean, we're seeing this in Loveland already. Conball Middle School, they've taken down and closed down Mary Blair, and several small elementary schools, and we're going towards the K through 12. High Plains is a K through 12, and Lakes of Centera, providing that community feel growth. Everybody going there. I guess I lied. K through 8, High Plains. They're still going to Mountain View for high school. But we're starting to get a lot of K through 8s for our actual public schooling, and not K through 12. Charters are going to K through 12.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's, I know curriculums are always hotly contested. We don't have any bonds set either for any schools to be built. So there's no there's no current schools that are in the pipeline to be built. So we can't really help increase the size of Timnath Middle High unless it gets voted on, and then we're years out, and then the build. So, these changes have to happen sooner than later. And I know that Fort Collins is talking about kind of like the ripping off of the Band-Aid, but I don't know. Do you have any friends or anything like that that are in the areas that are being impacted by this these school changes?
I don't have anybody as of right now being impacted, so I see very little and hear very little about it. But I mean, with the growth in Timnath right now, I'm without question, you're gonna have to separate middle school and high school. I mean, it's growing at an exponential rate, and to cater to those kids, you have to. So they're gonna have to
Yeah.
figure out something.
We've got some that are both in Westfield Park and then English Ranch, and we've got a lot of friends in English Ranch, honestly. So, I can only imagine, and I've had conversations with a couple of them that they're talking about getting shirts made, petition signs made. How can we recall the board, and so I'd love to hear anybody's insights if they're one directly impacted, two have gone through a similar situation, kind of like what you're saying, Zach, with Loveland, and three, like what do you do? Do you just kind of like roll with the punches and change as needed? Now, like Janae and I, we talked about if Werner were to close and we'd have to go to Cruise, it would be annoying. Like, don't get me wrong, like it would be annoying because like our kids currently could ride their bike all the time to school. And if Werner were to shut down and Cruise would be the one that they would have to go to, I would never let my kids ride their bike. Well, I shouldn't say never, because they are doing the Harmony underpass. I don't know if you've seen that,
Yep.
For the power trail. And so that would mean they would only have to cross one busy street. So maybe I'd ride them to that busy street, get them to the power trail, and let them ride their bikes from there, to Cruise. But that's a one-off situation, but that means I would have to drive, and it would be an annoyance, and I would have to do that. But it wouldn't. I'm happy with Cruise. I wouldn't be upset about them going to Cruise. I know that there's different programs and curriculums between the elementary schools that parents are very particular about, and I know that people have made $500,000, $750,000, $1 million purchases based off of what school they thought that they were going to be in and go to. That are now being impacted. So, that's kind of a big change. Before you jumped on, Zach, we were talking about like the land use code, foundational land use code that just passed on second reading 7.0, and lots of big changes. And
yeah,
change is tough. I mean,
one thing that Loveland did to kind of cater to that and help, they adjusted start times for elementary, middle school, and high school. So high schoolers are actually the latest start time, and I think a little bit plays into that of they're relying on these high school students to drive younger siblings and whatnot to school to get them started. And then obviously we don't get out as early as they do, so there's after school programs implemented so that they have somewhere to kind of hang out until their high school kids do get out to kind of help with transportation.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great point. There's probably going to have to be some, I know right now with our bus driver shortages, they had to change, start times of, so that bus drivers could be, we don't need as many, and they could be, doing dual routes. But I think, there's going to have to be more after school programs. And then, like you said, maybe high school kids are taking their siblings more to school and have to start a little bit later. But then I did also hear, I can't remember who, but like high school was starting later, and sometimes practices for like track and stuff or football or whatever, like they weren't getting done till like 6:30, 7 o'clock at night because of that.
Yeah, so that's pretty typical. So that was kind of the other side of that is they wanted these high school students to be getting more sleep because there's studies showing that they perform better with more sleep. But I don't know very many high school kids that don't have any kind of extracurriculars, whether it's drama, a sport, band, anything like that. So with me coaching right now, we start practice at 4:15 and we're not done until 6:30 on a daily basis. So we're really just pushing their whole schedule back, and it's pretty much the same in my opinion. But
yeah, I mean, I guess at that point, then you start talking about what's healthier, like not eating until 7:30 at night, or get more sleep. It's it's the chicken and egg type deal of like what's more important.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some programs start practice earlier in the morning since high school students don't start until 9 o'clock now. Of hey, swim practice is going to be in the morning prior to school starting, or wrestling practice baseball, anything like that. So yeah, there's a lot of things for people to figure out. It's never going to be perfect or ideal for every family or every situation, but they're trying to make the best out of the majority of the students and the families in the community. But we'll see what happens and what takes off. But the bus drivers, the shortage on the bus driver thing, that's kind of a crazy thing. Sporting events and anything that's outside of getting kids to school, it is very difficult as of right now to have bus drivers to get our students there. So a track meet could not start until 3:30, and our kids are getting dropped off at noon at the site where the
Oh.
competition is taking place, just so that bus drivers can get back to run their regular routes. And now you're taking kids out of school for a full day almost just to go do these sporting events.
AI, baby. We need the Tesla truck. I took a drive in a Tesla truck today. So,
Oh, geez. What you think of that?
I mean, it was cool. It was super unique. It was fun. I mean, it's got all the gizmos and gadgets you ever want. But I don't know. I'm a huge proponent of this too shall pass, right? So
Yes.
these changes are going to take place, and in 2 years or 3 years, it's just going to be, this is what it was. We used to go to, our school kid at Johnson, but now we go to Olander. And while it'll be difficult and frustrating, for a time, it'll be, just part of what the daily, activities are. So,
yep.
But I can tell you in the meantime, I know a lot of parents, it is going to be fireworks for the next 30 days or so in Fort Collins.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
We'll be coming to you guys live every Monday at noon. Talk to me and tell me if you guys liked, bringing Zach on. We'll bring some of our team members on. But I know Zach just released a video. If you guys haven't watched it, it's the best of Loveland. So go watch that. He was absolutely phenomenal. He and Izzy talked about, trails, hikes, restaurants, developments, all that good stuff that you can do in Loveland, and check that out. But I am very appreciative of the team that I have, and thanks for jumping on with me today, Zach.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. And yeah, I'm excited for the next video. Izzy and I are going to collab and get a couple more videos out there, and my skills are just going to get better and better. I don't like to be in front of camera, but face to face is my thing, not this camera thing. But times change, and we learn, right?
He does a great job, and the most important thing is you have 30 years of knowledge about Loveland, so it's not like you're just shooting from the hip. You know what you're talking about. So.
Absolutely, and I absolutely love it, or else I would have moved on. So
that's right.
It's keeping me here.
There we go. All righty. Until next week, guys. Have a great day.
All righty. See ya.